Mary Queen of Scots, on the 8th of February 1587, made her way into the great hall of Fotheringhay Castle. She had been told the night before that her execution was to be in the morning, as Elizabeth I, her cousin, and the Queen of England, had ordered her death sentence and signed the death warrant. Mary is considered today a woman who was complicit in a number of plots to overthrow and kill the English monarch, as she had been imprisoned by her for almost 2 decades. But Mary's execution was not swift, and it was not successful, with the executioner having a nightmare when he performed the job to take the head off the iconic Queen of Scotland. Following her death, her remains were treated rather poorly also, as she was buried in a place against her will, and in a service which was not in fitting with her religious beliefs, but she would later be exhumed. Join us today as we look at the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Previously, Mary had been placed on trial inside of Fotheringhay Castle, accused of treason. She claimed that she had never been a subject of Elizabeth I, and therefore could not be convicted of treason. However, despite this and her involvement in the Babington plot, she was condemned to death. The Babington plot would see Mary made Queen of England if successful, and it was said that Elizabeth I would have been executed by Catholics, as they believed she was not the rightful queen. But following the passing of Mary's death sentence, Elizabeth I, who had to sign her death warrant, could not bring herself to do it, and despite the fact Mary was her cousin, she was worried that God would judge her for taking the life of another anointed queen. But Mary was told in the evening of the 7th of February 1587 that she was to die the next day. That night she spent her final hours in prayer and made arrangements to distribute her belongings to the women of her household, and she wrote her will and final letters. All whilst this was happening, Fotheringhay Castle's great hall was being transformed into becoming a site of execution, with a scaffold being made in the centre of the room. It was on this platform that the block would be placed for Mary to rest her head before the axe would come down upon her. The scaffold was covered in black cloth, and it had 2 or 3 steps to climb onto it, and there also was a cushion for Mary to kneel on, and there were also 3 stools for her and the official witnesses, the Earls of Shrewsbury and Kent, to sit down upon. The executioner, a man named Bull, was summoned, and his assistant arrived at Fotheringhay to perform the job with him. But then the following morning it was time for Mary Queen of Scots to meet her executioner. She was a queen who had spent a lot of time locked up, and had reached the end of her tether, and with this she went to her execution with calm and quiet, and also with grace. She entered the great hall, and the witnesses were shocked by what they saw, and they said Mary entered with 2 female servants, who remained with her until the axe fell. The account of her execution was recorded by a witness who said that her, Mary Queen of Scots' prayers being ended, the executioners, kneeling, desired her grace to forgive them her death, who answered, "I forgive you of all my heart, for now I hope you shall make an end of all my troubles." Then they, with her 2 women, helping her up, began to disrobe her of her apparel. Then she, laying her crucifix upon the stool, one of the executioners took from the neck the Agnus Dei, which she, laying hands off it, gave to one of her women, and told the executioner he should be answered money for it. Then she suffered them, with her 2 women, to disrobe her of her chain of pomander beads, and all other her apparel, most willingly, and with joy rather than sorrow, helped to make unready herself, putting on a pair of sleeves with her own hands, which they had pulled off, and that with some haste, as if she longed to be gone. All this time they were pulling off her apparel, she never changed her countenance, but with smiling cheer she uttered these words, that she never had such grooms to make her unready, and that she never put off her clothes before such a company. Then she, being stripped of all her apparel, saving her petticoat and kirtle, her 2 women beholding her made great lamentation and crying, and crossing themselves prayed in Latin. Then she with a smiling countenance turned to her manservants, as Melvin and the rest standing upon a bench nigh the scaffold, with sometime weeping, sometimes crying out aloud, and continually crossing themselves prayed in Latin, crossing them with her hand bade them farewell, and wishing them pray for her, until even the last hour. This done, one of the women, having a Corpus Christi cloth lapped up 3 corner ways, kissing it, put it over the Queen of Scots' face, and pinning it fast to her caul of her head. Then the 2 women departed from her, and she kneeled down upon the cushion most resolutely, and without any token or fear of death, she spake aloud this psalm in Latin, In te Dominum confido, non confidar in aeternum. Then groping for the block, she laid down her head, putting her chin over the block with both her hands, which, holding there still, had been cut off had they not been espied. Then lying upon the block most quietly, and stretching out her arms, cried, In manus tuus Domine, 3 or 4 times. Then she, lying very still upon the block, one of the executioners holding her slight with one of his hands, she endured 2 strokes of the other executioner with an axe, she making very small noise or none at all, and not stirring any part of her from the place where she lay, and so the executioner cut off her head, saving one little gristle, with being cut asunder, he lifted up her head to the view of all the assembly, and bade God save the Queen. Then her dress of lawn, falling from her head, it appeared as grey as one of the 70 years old, polled very short, her face in a moment being so much altered from the form she had when alive, as few could remember her by her dead face. Her lips stirred up and down for 1/4 of an hour, after her head was cut off. Then Mr. Dean said with a loud voice, So perish all the Queen's enemies, and afterwards the Earl of Kent came to the dead body, and standing over it with a loud voice said, Such end of all the Queen's and the Gospel's enemies. Then one of the executioners pulling off her garters espied her little dog, which was crept under her clothes, which could not be gotten forth but by force, yet afterwards would not depart from the dead corpse, but came and lay between her head and her shoulders, which being imbrued with her blood was carried away and washed, as all things else were there that had blood was either burned or washed clean, and the executioners sent away with money for their fees, not having any one thing that belonged unto her. And so every man being commanded out of the hall except the sheriff and his men, she was carried by them up into the great chamber, lying ready for the surgeons to embalm her. Mary's execution did not go well. She was not beheaded in a single strike, and the first blow that rained down missed her neck, and the axe then hit the back of her head, causing immense pain. This could have knocked her out. But the second blow of the axe then landed, and did not completely perform the job, with the executioner then needing to saw through the final part with his axe. When he picked the head up, her wig slipped off, and then the head fell onto the floor. It was a terrible end for a woman who was incredibly significant in history. She was then embalmed and was buried briefly inside Peterborough Cathedral, but then when her son became the King of England after the death of Elizabeth I, he would move her remains into Westminster Abbey, and the heart of English religion and government in a huge tomb, showing her importance. She was a victim of Elizabeth I, however the English Queen would for the rest of her life regret the signing of the death warrant of Mary, Queen of Scots. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.